coming up in this episode.
And sometimes, yeah, if your friends don't really understand where you're coming from, they don't, like, the number of times I've heard people say to me, just like, you just need to take a break. I'm like, I know. I totally
But also it's
understand
not that simple.
But like there's only 4 people like working in the company at the moment. If I take a break, who's taking like the slack, taking on the slack? And like I'm the only one that does what I do.
But also I think these sort of celebrity podcasters, whatever you want to call them, these founders, that, you know, I think we have to bear in mind as audience members that they're no longer in the business. Like they're not incentivized to give practical, grounded advice. They're incentivized to create content, right? Mm-hmm. They need to get clicks. So, you know, increasingly they're going to book guests that are more controversial and less useful.
Learning through experience is like the most valuable learning, I think. And I just don't think you could go to university to learn how to be a founder. It's just, I just think it's impossible. All the different curveballs, the new things that are happening all the time. I mean, I genuinely don't know how I've done what I've done because I didn't know any of it beforehand.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg McCullum. Raw, uncensored conversations with startup founders.
Hello, Isabella. How are you? Oh, Isabella, how are you? Sorry. Coughed immediately and then mispronounced your name. What a great start. How's it going?
All right. Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. As you can probably tell, I am a little bit under the weather. So, yeah, my apologies. But I am recovering. So I might I might mute every now and then just to cough. But yeah, how are you?
I'll forgive you.
Good. Thanks. How's your week been?
Very, very busy. Yeah, we're in Germany working with a potential client. So I'm at their offices right now, which is why I said, unfortunately, I'm going to have to finish quite on the dot because they kick everybody out of the building.
Oh, okay, fair enough. That's a good reason. That's not a problem. Not a problem at all.
In fact, I'm going to turn around because I don't want to wipe what's on the board off because I don't know if they need it, but I also don't know if it's top secret or anything. So I'm going to turn around with a plain wall behind me.
It's a very pretty wall.
Yeah, stylish. Oh my God, now I look like I'm sat in like a basement somewhere, but okay, it's fine. Just
like from
try
a prison.
And cover up that.
From a prison.
Try and cover up. Oh my God, that's even worse.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. Honestly, it looks good.
I'm covering up that big bit of big chunk of concrete.
It's authentic to the startup lifestyle, isn't it? You know.
Oh, 100%.
Well, look, it's really good to see you again, and thanks for jumping on because I do, like you said, I know how busy you are, and so everyone that's able to do these things, I really, really appreciate how generous you are.
I appreciate you inviting me as well.
Awesome. I think that's cool, and it's it's great to see you again. So, tell me what's been going on. Like, I tell you what. Before we get into it, the one bit of structure to this entire mess of a show that I do is I just ask my guests to introduce themselves and a bit about them and the business, if that's okay. So why don't we start there, and then maybe you can tell me a bit about what you've been up to since we last spoke.
Sure. So I'm Isabella. I'm one of the founders of InHaus. I'm the CEO. We also have a creative director. Till Jans. We started this about 4 years ago. That's when we registered the company, but we actually didn't do very much for a few months because we were sort of just messing around with the idea, and then we managed to get some investment, and from there we've raised 3 times. Not huge amounts of money, but enough to get us off the ground and actually running. We now have fully functioning products that we're super proud of. InHaus is a tool that enables fashion brands to create product videos at speed, at scale, and affordably. So those are the 3 things that we promise. We target the super high volume retailers. So although we have connections with brands like Gucci and Chanel, who are very exciting, they're not the ones that we're targeting. We're going for sort of the ASOS, Farfetch, Zalando, that kind of company. Right. The ones who are producing or hoping to produce, wanting to produce a lot of videos. So we're talking about 500,000 a year, which is why using the traditional methods of video making, it's practically impossible to manage that many. And we have simplified the whole process. We do it on a mobile phone. So the recording is done via the InHaus app. It gets sent into the cloud where we have an automatic editing system. So all those little clips get stitched together into a video that follows a recipe. Each client has a different recipe. We work on that recipe with our clients. And then they get re-downloaded by the client, and they can see the video that comes out, and it's basically ready.
It's awesome. And
yeah,
I'll include the link to the website and everything in the description of this episode. People can check it out. So incredibly exciting stuff. And that's an enormous amount of videos that they go through. What is their main usage of them? Is this on websites?
So it's specifically for e-commerce. So if you go online to any shop, you've got to see a photograph of the product that you're buying. It's very unusual not to have a product photograph, but actually videos increase conversion rates, but also reduce returns. So it's really important at the moment to be reducing those returns, because they cost retailers a huge amount of money, especially in fashion. So they want to be making video, but as I said, with traditional methods, they just can't manage the amount of video that they want. They currently manage video for about 15% of the products. That's 15%. So it's a really small number. Even the ones who are doing really well don't manage to make video for every single item they have online.
That's crazy.
But in-house is going to change that.
I'm going to share my screen quickly just so that people can see while we're talking, for those that are watching, but also to ask you, so your website, so there's this part of your website here which is showing an example. So this is AI generated, is that right?
No, it's recorded.
Oh, it's been recorded.
Actually, okay. Yeah, it's recorded. So it's literally just an app, like a camera app that we've built. It's the InHaus app. And then you don't see it here because this is just sort of the recording screen. But once they've recorded some clips, which is kind of what you can see there, you press submit, and those clips get sent into the cloud, get edited into a video. And then that's the control panel that I talked about, which is the client just logs into a web-based control panel. So that thing on the right, and that's where they can see the videos coming in and download them and use them.
Sorry, that's maybe I didn't maybe phrase my question particularly, but the AI element is coming into the editing side of things. It's not generating the images.
Kind of, it's not really AI. When we started out, we had this grand vision of using a lot of AI, and how we could use a lot of AI. And the more we worked on it, the more we realized that actually scripting and some clever programming was enough for now. We want to move into AI in the future, but as a startup and a small startup, we didn't need it at the moment. Yeah.
And I suppose once you've got the idea of the sort of style that they want, and some of them like the what did you call it? That you
called it a recipe, video recipe.
Yeah, I suppose once you have that, it is the case that it's just more of a formula than the requirement of an AI, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were going to do all sorts of really exciting things, analyzing music and using the music to edit, but in the end, a formula was enough.
Sure. But it's still pretty damn cool. So yeah, like tell me what's been going on since we last spoke. It was a while ago we spoke now. It's
it was a good few months ago.
Yeah. What's been going on in the world of Isabella?
So yeah, we started working with a couple of clients, sort of testing with them. We've got a lot of interest, however, also a lot of pushback from people who don't believe that phones are going to be good enough. People still want to use fancy video cameras, which I understand. But the thing is, the use case of these videos is that they're going up on a website. Most people use mobiles for shopping anyway, so the videos are only about this big.
Right.
And the videos that the phone produces are actually excellent quality. We have been doing A/B testing, and they are completely holding up against any Sony or Canon DSLR. So all that A/B testing is really paying off. I can't really talk about who we're working with at the moment, but we've done four weeks of testing with them, comparing videos made with the iPhone versus any other camera, and they're deciding to move forward. So it's a really exciting time, which is why I'm so busy at the moment. But it's exactly where we wanted to be. So
it's interesting that there's still that pushback from that perspective, like that they're presumably, photographers, people maybe slightly married to their tech, their legacy tech, that they just can't accept the fact. It's like people who swear vinyl is better than, like it's that kind of thing. It's like
exactly like that. So photographers a few years ago didn't want to give up film,
right,
and move to digital. But that change did happen, because it depends what use case you're using these cameras for, and like what you actually want to use it for. And like, you've got to remember that the iPhones now, they're coming out, the cameras are getting better and better. The new ones are out in September, and pretty much all the improvements happening on that phone are camera based. So iPhones, Apple are really focusing in on getting those cameras.
And like you said, it just depends on use case, right? I mean, I could maybe understand if they were sort of saying, well, look, if we're going to be building a catalog of stuff, we would like it so it's compatible with many other use cases. So if we do want to put it up on a big screen at an event or something, you know, or use it in an ad, okay, maybe I could get that. But if the vast majority of the use cases is, like you said, just going to be viewed on a small screen, maybe a PC at most, it's like, come on, you know.
They have different shoots. Every single fashion brand will have a different style of shoot for campaigns or billboards or anything like that.
Right.
We are focusing on that really fast turnaround that's needed. And although, yeah, they need to look good and this is why the A/B testing is really important. It's not a cinematic experience.
Right. That's not the point.
You want an authentic, accurate representation of an item of clothing. The color needs to be correct. You want to see the movement. You want to see somebody wearing it. All of those things.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's interesting how people get so married to these things, isn't it? But I suppose if you've built an entire career off of, you know, a specific thing, then it's quite difficult to let go, isn't it? You know,
and not many people like change. I personally, I hate change. Having to change, I changed my computer recently, and it's only going from one Mac to a newer Mac, but I hated it. That process for me took me about a week to take the step away from the old one, just because it felt different. But yeah, I totally get it as well. Like, it's a different piece of equipment. I think lots of people were scared that the creativity was getting taken away from them because they're going to use a phone and they're used to using these sort of cameras, which they felt were really receptive to whatever they wanted to actually play around with to make creative videos. However, e-commerce companies don't want creative videos necessarily for e-commerce. They want them to look standardized. They want them to look regular. So when you open that website, you can see which website you're on, and you can understand from looking at the photos. You don't even need to read that you're on H&M or Zara. You want to understand the look and feel of this brand, and that has to be represented in each of those videos or photos.
It's a sales and marketing resource. It's, at the end of the day, it's not an exercise in artistic expression, is it? Right?
Exactly.
Necessarily, you know. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's interesting you say that about change. I think I'm probably the opposite of that, in a sense that I look at change too often. Like I just love mixing things up and keep changing things. I'm forever reorganizing where things are and, you know, tweaking things and stuff. Like I need someone to tell me, like, it's okay to just leave things alone sometimes.
So you're like my co-founder. My co-founder is exactly like that. So we make a balanced team. Yeah.
It's a good balance to have.
Anything that's new, technology based, software based, he's interested. And actually, that's another point to make. I know that we've been talking about cameras and how important they are, and how like the iPhone really compares to the Canon or Sony or any other camera. The reason that we're using phones is that they're connected to the internet. The workflow process is suddenly so easy. You can scan a barcode using the phone. It names the files. It's all set up in the back end. You send the clips by just pressing submit. So there's no need to remove an SD card. You don't need to carry that SD card over to video editors. They don't need to download it from the SD card. It's all automatic. So one of the things is that InHaus is really, we've called it InHaus, which is spelled like Bauhaus. Form follows function. Super very keen on UX and UI and making sure that like workflow process is smooth, and we're helping people. So it's like, although our client is obviously like the fashion brand, our real clients are the ones who are working in the studios using our tools. I come from a styling background, have done lots of e-commerce styling. My co-founder also did lots of photography work and art director work for an e-commerce company. So we really understood the people on the ground and what their tasks were that they have to perform on a day-to-day basis. And remember, this is 5 days a week, all hours of the day. It is repetitive. So yeah, we had that in mind when we were building InHaus.
Well, I was going to ask about that actually, in some ways, about the sort of origins of the platform. So can you take me back to kind of when you and presumably your co-founder at the same time, did you come up with this idea together, or was it one of you and you came to the other? Like, can you take me back to that point? Like, what was the catalyst for this idea? And
it's his idea.
Right.
He he had the idea a good few years before we even started anything to do with InHaus, and he, kind of classic founder as well, sort of was like, oh, nobody's done it yet. Somebody will do it soon. Nobody's done it yet. Somebody will do this idea soon.
Yeah.
And then I think it was about 4 years of him sort of like mulling it over, and the idea kind of changed slightly in his head. But really, the focus was always sort of like, how can you make videos fast and effectively? And then when iPhone technology caught up, that really was the sort of like moment that we could move on it. He told me about it. I decided to jump on board because I totally saw the value in it, and here we are.
And as you were saying, you were both in the industry already by that point. So what sort of very specifically were you both doing in the industry?
So Till is a photographer and director. He
Right.
still is a photographer and director. He still does that to this day. He splits his time between InHaus and doing that. It's valuable because he knows all the contacts. So when I said like, oh, we know Gucci and Chanel, it's actually him. He knows Gucci and Chanel.
Sure.
I personally don't. I was a stylist for quite a few years. As I mentioned, I was doing freelance work in London, and then actually I decided to stop doing that because freelance
What
life
does
is
that
not for
mean?
me.
What is a stylist? I don't know anything about this word, right? So to explain to a layman what that means.
Okay, so if you're working on an editorial, so that's something that goes into a magazine. So there's sort of like glossy magazines where there's people wearing clothes.
Right.
You come up with a concept, normally with a photographer. You come up with a brief and a mood board, and then you go out and you ask brands to borrow their clothes.
Okay.
So there's lots of emailing, and then they send you their clothes. Sometimes they don't. It's very stressful because when they don't, you don't have anything to dress the model in. And then on the day you dress the model, you make sure they look exactly like you want them to and represent your vision. And then at the end of the day, you send the clothes back.
And presumably they pay for that because it's promoting their brand, or is this just it's content?
Depends how big you are.
Right.
Depends how big your name is, basically. Yeah.
I see.
And then that's why if you're doing that, which is very, very creative, lots of stylists style at e-commerce companies to make the rent.
Right.
So that's where I was doing e-commerce styling as well. And lots of photographers do the same thing. E-commerce is sort of like that thing that is just constantly there, constantly needing people to work for it.
So a reliable sort of source of income and work versus the more creative.
You balance
side.
the creative with the paying.
Right.
Yeah. And so I did that for quite a few years. So to start at the very beginning, I did classics at university.
Okay.
So I did Latin and ancient stuff, and then I did styling, which is very different because I was like, no, I never want to do classics again. And then after styling, I was like, no, I don't want to be a freelancer. So I went into sort of project management work at museums and galleries.
Oh, interesting.
Mainly in London, yeah. So I was sort of handling budgets, training teams, hiring teams, organisation, and that's basically what I do at InHaus.
What art museums and galleries, or?
No. So I was in-house at art museums and galleries, but then when we made InHaus.ai, that's kind of what I do here. I'm in charge of, as the CEO of a small startup, you do HR, you do payroll, you do
everything, yeah.
Literally everything. So yeah, my role kind of fitted. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting journey. So would it be fair to say that you've pulled a lot from, like, what do you see as the sort of key skill sets that you were pulling throughout that journey? I mean, especially maybe when studying the classics, I'm curious to know how the application of Latin has played out in the day-to-day life.
It's had impact. I used to be able to read hieroglyphics as well, so I mean, like, really had a great language skill set, but unimportant in real life. I just wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Who doesn't?
So well, exactly. And I did tell them that in my interview for university, and they accepted me. So they obviously thought I was worthy of being Indiana Jones. I don't know.
Not Lara Croft.
I do Lara Croft as well, but I just don't think I'd be as good with a gun. Like Indiana Jones, he's got the whip.
Yeah.
I just think it's just in general having a wide range of skills and then building them into whatever role that you're doing is super important. and that's kind of how I feel what I do now is how it's effective. I mean,
it's
I
interesting
this
you
is the
mentioned
first
about
startup.
sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say it's the first startup I've ever done. I've never run a business myself. I've never done anything like it. So everything was new. Fundraising. I didn't even know what fundraising was. Embarrassing story. Till said, "Oh, should we do this business then?" And I was like, "We can't start a business. We've got no money." And he was like, "You don't use your own money. You use other people's money." And I was like, I thought Dragon's Den, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I thought that was just a TV show. I didn't
Right.
realize it was a real thing in real life. So
it's interesting because there's individuals like yourself, at that time, who have no idea about the startup world initially, and are completely sort of ignorant in some ways to that. And then on the flip side, there are people who rely on that almost too heavily as their perception of the startup world, in that they can just come up with any idea and they're just going to be given all the money in the world to go make it happen. And the reality is far from either one of those things, isn't it? It's like, actually far more complex than that. So tell me about that journey for fundraising then, to go into that, very, completely blind, and having to learn about the process and how to be investment ready. That must have been quite a journey.
Yeah, so we were lucky to have a friend who had done a startup. So he was the one who sort of said, like, right, so you need a pitch deck. And I was like, right, okay, so you Google a pitch deck. And we made one, and it was about 38 pages long, read like a novel, had every single idea that we could possibly think of in there, had ideas which we still haven't even built, which is still sort of like hopefully on the roadmap. And we took it to somebody to just have a look at it and say, like, just what do you think? And thankfully he said, this is a great idea, we need to sort out your pitch deck, but it's a great idea, I'll take some people that I think will invest.
Wow.
So yeah, that's kind of how it started, just by chance. And then I don't think I even really thought that I was starting a business. It just kind of happened, and then I got the investment, and then it was like, oh right, well, I've got somebody's money now, I better like really think about what I'm doing with it. And then you sort of get to a point where you're like, right, I'm ready to raise a bit more money now. And then you go out there and do it again. And this time I sort of knew what I was doing a little bit better, as in I knew how to make a pitch deck, which wasn't 38 pages long. I think it was about 17. Couldn't cut it down to any less than that. And by that point, I'd started to network again.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like and subscribe with notifications turned on.
You hear this word networking throughout your whole life, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't realize that networking is just meeting people.
It sounds quite wanky, let's be honest, doesn't it? Before you really understand what it is, it sounds a bit wanky. And then actually, I think, once you realize the importance of it, especially for something like investing, it becomes a bit clearer that it's not as wanky as maybe it is.
It's also really important. It's not just sort of like the wanky part, it's the support networks that you build through networking, meeting other founders for the first time. So now, like, if I have a question, I have like a Slack channel of like hundreds of founders that you can just put a question into and be like, has anyone done anything like this? Has anyone got an accountant who can answer this question for me?
Or even if you're just having a bit of a shitty day, just knowing that there might be someone you can just say, look, dude, can we go and grab a coffee? I just need to have a bit of a rant.
Exactly.
I'm struggling. I'm just not feeling like I'm moving the needle. Like, just that is so important, because like you said, I mean, not many of us have, prior to entering into the sort of entrepreneurial lifestyle, have entrepreneurs around us. Some of us do, but it's unlikely. So, to have that shared experience is quite difficult to find.
And sometimes, if your friends don't really understand where you're coming from, they don't, like, the number of times I've heard people say to me, just like, you just need to take a break. I'm like, I know. I totally.
But also, it's not that simple.
But, like, there's only 4 people like working in the company at the moment. If I take a break, who's taking like the slack, taking on the slack? And like, I'm the only one that does what I do. Like, we have 2 programmers, so I mean, they do different roles as well. So it's like, basically, if anyone goes on holiday, that role is just unfilled for that amount of time. So I can't wait to start building that support network through, not through networking, from networking, but like sort of building that into like my actual business when I can get some more employees, get some, and not because I want to be like the boss of all these people, but like genuinely coming into work and being like, how is everyone? Like, today's been tough. I've just answered like 50 emails. Like, what have you done?
Yeah.
I kind of miss that about working with people from back in the day. But
well, and it allows you to actually focus on, like you said, not having to wear as many hats and wear the CEO hat and actually drive the business forward as the CEO, which, you know, focus on those core responsibilities. But it's funny, you know, what you were saying there is one of the reasons why I get very frustrated around the rhetoric around burnout for founders and CEOs. I get very frustrated about that, the conversation, because usually a lot of people who talk about burnout as in how to avoid burnout as a founder have never been a founder before themselves. These are, you know, like fucking university graduates that, you know, have studied psychology or sociology, and they suddenly think they know everything about, you know, how to look after yourself and mental health. And it's like, the reality is, when you run your own business or businesses, like you said, this idea of, you know, someone giving you that advice of just take a break. I mean, that's what you say to an employee of a business, because that makes sense. For them, that's what makes sense. I'm feeling a bit tired and burnt out. I'll book some annual leave. But it's not how it works as an entrepreneur. You book a week off, all you're going to be doing is stressing, like, you'll increase anxiety way more.
Yeah.
And that's even contingent on the fact that it might even be logistically possible, which in most cases it's not. So it's something that I get very frustrated about, this idea of like, oh, how to best avoid burnout, take regular breaks, do this, do that. It's like, no, actually, we need to finish the projects, then we'll have a break.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's always a project after the next project. That's
of course,
the problem.
Yeah. I think the more real and honest approach to that topic is just it's less about trying to avoid burnout and how to deal with burnout, because it's going to happen. And so it's like how to make it constructive rather than I don't know, destructive, right?
Yeah.
More than anything, and not to feel guilty about feeling burnt out. Like, that's part of the process in some ways.
All these things of sort of like, make sure your sleep pattern's good and make sure this, and it's like, yeah, my sleep pattern is great. I go to bed at like a decent time. I make sure I relax. But when you wake up at 1 a.m. thinking about a contract and how you didn't add something into it, like, there's nothing that can save you from that moment at 1 a.m.
Yeah. But it's also, it's like that advice of like, you know, make sure you sleep okay and exercise and eat properly. It's like the same advice of telling someone like, it's good to be nice to people. You know, it's like, well, yeah, obviously, this is obviously good advice. Like, you know, I don't need to be told how to just like breathe and walk. Like, you know, give me constructive tips. Like, how can I do more? Like, how can I deal with the stress? Like, what was some, you know, stuff like that, as opposed to just, you know, make sure you eat a vegetable. It's like, fuck off, dude, I know.
I'm really aware of all the things I should be doing. It's whether I'm actually doing them or not, because like all the other stuff that's like encroaching on that time, it's like, you know, you're trying to stave off all this like stuff, and it's just like, oh, just have a banana. It's like, oh.
Have a banana. Exactly, that's the one fruit to solve all problems. Have a banana.
Just go to the gym and exercise. It's like, I've never exercised in my life, why would I start now? I don't have time to do anything, I'd rather go to the pub.
But again, these are all sensible things, like, you know, and you can't like be too angry with someone for suggesting them if they're trying to be helpful. But like, again, if you're not in that position, it's like telling me to go to the gym when I've got an unlimited list of things that I need to be getting done. Like, that's not the most useful piece of advice. I know that already, and I know I probably could carve out half an hour or an hour to go on the treadmill or something, but that's not what I need help with. Like,
there's been lots of sort of like, you follow founders who are being successful on Instagram and so on. There's quite a lot of people talking recently, I've seen in the last sort of year, about how like you've got to schedule those things. Don't expect them to happen. It's never going to just happen. You've got to schedule going to the gym. You've got to schedule reading your book. You've got to schedule cooking dinner. So to be fair, I work hard, but I close my laptop at 6. Unless there's like a huge deadline, but I try and be like 6, I have to stop, and I can pick up something else. Like, I could do some reading or like doing something, but I have to close my laptop. I need to walk home. I need to cook myself some dinner. So I'm not I'm not that bad. I know I've just been laughing about how bad it is, but no, I do try and
No, routine
give
is
myself,
important. Yeah. No,
and
absolutely.
eating properly is super important.
Mm.
And I love cooking, so for me, I know lots of people don't, so it would be a horrible chore at the end of the day. But for me, that's my sort of like, my brain can let go from work for a little while.
I'm the same. I cook at home. That's my main role.
I love it,
and I love it.
Yeah.
It's that moment where music's on. I'm just some level of creativity too. I think you know,
trying a new recipe that you haven't tried before, and like the sort of, it's that thing I've been hearing a lot about as well recently, where like you need to try new things, like it's like that whole like learn a new language, and it helps your brain stay without dementia and so on, like sort of better for later in life. And like, yeah, I love trying new recipes. That's my sort of like learning languages. I know I said about university I did languages, but I hate it. But cooking and trying to discover sort of like, okay, so I've kind of done this before, but I've not quite done this before. And like, yeah, putting that together is, I think that's what I'm good at. Like even as a CEO, to be honest, like thinking on my feet, reacting to things. I'm very bad. If somebody says, for example, make a pitch deck, I can sit in front of my computer for hours, just like, where do I even begin?
Right.
But reacting to something that is like, shit, something's happened, it needs to be sorted, or this needs to be done super quickly. That I'm great at that. That's my strength.
I can relate to that. If there's no, which is why I'm not good with things without deadlines, right? Hard and fast deadlines, and the quicker the deadline comes in, the better. If, like you said, if it's like we need a pitch deck by tomorrow because we've just secured this really big, meeting with this investor, I'm like, okay, I'm on it, and it will be done, and it will be pretty good, But yeah, if it's just like we generally need a pitch deck, I'm like, well, why?
My brain just does not engage.
Yeah, it's not a problem that needs solving, so therefore I'm not interested. There's a really good example of this is, and this winds my wife up to no end. She and her family, I remember when we first met, we went over like for one of the Christmases, the very first Christmas we all spent together with her family. And what they do every year is soon after sort of Christmas dinner and everything like that, they all go, right, let's go for a walk. And so they're like, right, Greg, we do this every year. We're just going to go, and have a Christmas walk. I'm like, okay, where are we going? And I'm like, well, no, we're just going to go for a Christmas. Well, yeah, but we must be going somewhere. Where are we going? And I couldn't wrap my head around the fact we weren't walking for any particular reason to any particular destination. It was walking for walking's sake. And I was like, that makes no sense to me. I'm like, I don't get that. What's the destination? I need to know the destination. Like,
so even if it's like we're just going to walk to here and then back, that's fine.
That's enough.
I am
for
the
me.
same
like,
as you.
Is there a pub? Like, what's
then
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, right, I'm walking fast at that rate.
Yeah, well then I'm up for a sprint. It's like. But no, that kind of thing annoys me. Unless there's a genuine goal involved in something, I'm not going to do it for the doing its sake. Like there has to be a motivational thing behind it. So I can very much relate to that for sure. Yeah, very much so. But it's interesting what you said as well about you get a lot of these exited founders or celebrity founders these days who kind of reel off their top tips. I have a bit of a theory about them too, because I can't help but wonder sometimes a lot of the stuff they spouse about out there is just absolute bullshit, right? And I have a theory that it's because I think that founder memory is quite short. That when you're in it, it's very easy, I think, to express to some degree and all understand collectively for those that are in it what it's really like, what the reality of it is. But once you have come out the other end and maybe sold a business for a considerable amount of money and maybe propelled to millionaire and slightly celebrity status, your memory is pretty much wiped. You've got the Men in Black kind of, flash, and suddenly you're seeing the past with rose-tinted glasses, and actually you don't really remember the gritty details. So giving that advice is that's more grounded and real is probably almost impossible.
I totally agree. Like the whole celebrity podcast of exited founder, and I'm like, great advice, but like literally every week you're telling me to do a new thing that's going to improve my life or help me or whatever, and I'm like, I can't fit any more in. Like if you're telling me like swap my banana for an apple, I know I keep bringing up bananas like fruit and stuff, like a simple swap, okay, maybe I can manage it. But you can't just keep adding things that are good for me. In the same way that like there's lots of sort of like, okay, you must read this book about founders and running a business, and as a CEO you must read this book, and I'm like, how many books do I need to read? I can barely get my work done. And then it's like, oh, just read when you wake up or read before bed. I'm like, if I read a book about work before bed, I just, my brain starts whirring. I couldn't. Everyone kept telling me to watch what's that TV show that was really successful just now? Succession.
Oh yeah.
Everyone kept telling me to watch Succession, and I started watching it. I watched the first episode during a fundraise last summer, and it was an incredibly stressful time. And I think in the first episode, they have to get something signed by a certain time, some sort of document. And I was like, I can't watch any more of this because it's like my life. Right. Not because I'm as successful as people in Succession, but just sort of that stress of being like, just sign it. I've sent you this. I've done this, and it's that. It's just work again.
That sort of sense of being on edge all the time. Yeah. You want things that are going to take away from that as opposed to add to that level of anxiety, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But also I think these sort of celebrity podcasters, whatever you want to call them, these founders, that, you know, I think we have to bear in mind as audience members that they're no longer in the business. Like they're not incentivized to actually to give practical, grounded advice. They're incentivized to create content, right? They need to get clicks. So, you know, increasingly they're going to book guests that are more controversial and less useful, because the reality is the advice will probably be the same pretty much every single time. I know when I, you know, in my capacity as an advisor and mentor for startups and founders, I'm generally picking, you know, apart from the sort of more bespoke, detailed oriented stuff, the sort of main umbrella stuff I'm going from is the same. Like it's pretty much the same every time. Like, you know, I've got stuff that I even say on this show that my audience is already aware of me saying again and again and again. And it's like, Greg, here he goes again. Like he's going to say the thing, you know, and it's like, well, because it's true. Like, you know, that you can't, you know, I'm not going to pander to this idea of trying to constantly draw out my own value by, you know, throwing something new. It's like someone who's selling a course that's like, oh, but there's another course you've got to do before you reach the end. I mean, it's like, otherwise you just become like Scientology, you know, it's a never ending, you know what I mean? And it's just, and I'm not interested in that. And I think we need to be aware of that when we watch these people. It's a business in of itself to keep your attention, right?
Yeah.
That's why they have money.
Exactly. And like creating content for people who'd be interested in them, for example, founders, but it's a podcast that's an hour and a half long. I'm like, can you do it in 10 minutes?
Right.
Because like, I don't have time. Do you understand that?
Yeah, it's entrepreneur porn otherwise at that point, which is why, look, I mean, I hope that I'm doing the right thing with this show. Now you've got me second guessing it now, but but I think, you know, that the objective here is to kind of do that, is to ground it a bit. I think, you know, to allow people to see that it's not all about what a lot of entrepreneurs and founders try and very elaborately present to the world as this very carefully constructed thing, that we're all just human, and we, you know, that there's a story behind all of us, and that's why I'm interested to know yours, and I think other people are too, to sort of be reassured in some way, to be like, oh, I also don't know anything about fundraising, and this person didn't, but they did it. Like, that's reassuring, as opposed to, you know, someone coming along very confidently saying, if you're going to fundraise, it's like, well, dude, you didn't know 2 months ago how to do it, so like, shut up. You know, it's
learning through experience is like the most valuable learning, I think. And I just don't think you could go to university to learn how to be a founder. It's just, I just think it's impossible. All the different curveballs, the new things that are happening all the time. I mean, I genuinely don't know how I've done what I've done, because I didn't know any of it beforehand. But my last fundraise, I not had an argument, but had a discussion with somebody about the best way to go about fundraising. And they were
the
like,
fact that you said not an argument and then changed your mind leads me to believe it probably was an argument.
No, it wasn't an argument. It was somebody who wanted me to fundraise in a certain way.
Right.
And I was saying, no, we shouldn't do it that way. There's a better way of doing things now. And was explaining what it is. And then they were sort of saying the counter argument to it. So just being like, but what about this? Should we not do this? And I was like, no, we do it this way now. This is how we do it. This is how it's better. This is why it's going to be better. And by the end of the conversation, I literally left the room and I was like, what's happened to me? Like, how do I know all of this? And I also think people need to remember that these things happen in cycles. So when you're fundraising, you're at the top of your game of fundraising. and then you can't hold all that information forever, so you kind of forget it all. And like, if I had to start fundraising again, I would have to sort of like ramp it up in that sort of like read a few articles, remind myself about that and this, and like go back into like, you know, my cap table and sort of remind myself about, you know, like if somebody asked me like, how much percent does so and so have now, I'd have no idea. But in the middle of a fundraise, you ask me and I've got the answers there. So I think people have to remember that like these things do happen in cycles. You can't hold all the information in your head at all times. Like right now, and I'm in the middle of contract writing, so like I'm at the top of my game in terms of contract writing.
Right.
But in 2 months' time, if you said to me like, what was 3.2 in your contract, I'd have no idea. Like, you know.
Yeah. You're constantly reinventing yourself for what you're needed to be as a CEO on any given occasion, essentially, is what you're saying. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. But I also think, again, it's really reassuring for people because of the amount of founders I speak to, is really early in their journey, especially, that are asking me, you know, what book should I be reading, what should I be watching, etc., because I'm about to go start fundraising and I don't want to sound like an idiot. I'm like, no, go out and sound like an idiot. Like, actually, that's good. Like, because of the last thing you want to do, and I think in life in general, and this is something I try and instill with my children too, is to act like a know-it-all. Like, it doesn't work. Like, people
surround yourself with people who are more intelligent than you.
Right, and own it. You know, own the fact that you don't know what you don't know. I think that's super important. And just, you know, and investors really want to see that too. If you say, you know, if they say like, you know, I don't know, what's, you know, what's your TAM or whatever, and you're like, I'm sorry, I don't actually know what that is. That's, you know, far more, you're probably not going to get investment, but like, at least that you can ask them what it is, and they can explain it to you, and you can learn along the way. And that's far more impressive, I think, than someone trying to bluff their way through it. I mean, that's so transparent. You know.
Yeah, and also, but I just also think like nobody is completely hopeless. People know what their business is roughly. So if somebody says, "What's your TAM?" and you don't know what your TAM is, but then you sort of say, "Can you just explain what TAM it is?" and then they explain, and then you'll be like, "Oh, right, okay, so this is what I think my TAM is," but you just didn't know the phrase TAM, or you hadn't thought of it before as like TAM, SOM, whatever. But you do still have that sort of innate knowledge somewhere inside you because it's your business, and like, you
probably do have those answers, but it's just it's most of the time it's people asking like, what's the terminology I should be aware of? Like, I want to make sure I'm speaking the same language. It's like, well, you don't need to. You're a founder, they're an investor. Let them speak investor, you speak founder. Right? They're actually more interested in the fact that you know how to run a business really well, and that you're going to make it successful, than whether or not you can speak with them. Like, that isn't important to them, you know?
Yeah, one of the first things that happened was the first people I spoke to, they were like, "You've got to go and get SEIS," and I was like, "Excuse me?" But I went away and I got SEIS, and I came back and I was like, "Right, I've got it." And apparently, that's one of the moments where they were like, "Yes, okay, she's done the first thing that we asked her to." She's like, obviously it didn't tick all the boxes or anything, but it was just that sort of like, I think when you say you're going to do something, you've got to show that you're going to do it.
Right.
And
for example, learn what it is, and you're going to do it.
Like deliver on that thing. I mean, it's pretty simple. In a business, you just need to deliver on deliverables that are promised. Usually on time, because not everything can be on time, but usually on time. You just need to be trustworthy, and that's for investors, it's for clients, it's for your employees, your co-founder, everybody surrounding you. The most important thing to be is reliable.
Well, and I suppose in some ways what you're describing there is how important it is to, in order for any individuals to work with one another in whatever capacity, whether it's partnerships or closely in a team or whatever, their sort of level of agreeability and disagreeability, right? This ability sort of how easy are they to work with, essentially? And, you know, for you, that example of just saying, you know, they've made a request and you go, okay, I don't know what that is, I'll go and find out and I'll do it, is an indication of, okay, we can see ourselves working with this person, because to some extent they are coachable. So it doesn't really, you know, they've got a great business, and okay, maybe they're not, the founder isn't investable by the sort of the ideal profile of what a founder might look like, but they are coachable enough for us to get there over time. And that's really what matters, compared to someone who has very stubbornly decided that they are already perfect. And that's I've met tons of founders like that, and it's no surprise they never get anywhere in business or in life, because
You basically shoot yourself in the foot over and over again, because
yeah,
I've worked with people like that many times, not necessarily founders, but just in any sort of area of business, somebody who's like, this is the answer, and you're like, oh, but can we just talk about it? And the answer is essentially like a block.
Yeah,
that's not somebody you want to be working with, because then you have to go through them, not around them or even with them.
Right.
And also, like, being open to being convinced. Like, if somebody thinks they know that they are right, I'm not the kind of person who's going to be like, well, you're absolutely not, and I override that. Always a conversation, always a sort of a decision that's going to be, it's a thought, it's a process.
Well, it's the difference between argument and argument, right? You know, from discourse to disagreement. It's like the difference between those two things, right? You don't want things to be a battle. You want them to be a collaboration. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having strong held beliefs, but what's the expression that we have? I can't remember what it is now. It's a very famous quote, isn't it, in the startup world? And I always mess it up. To have a set of loosely held strong beliefs or something like that, something along those lines. It's a really good, good point. And it's that idea of, once you've made a decision, do it and do it, 100%, but hold your convictions rather loosely and be prepared to be challenged. I think that's a good way to do things in general, in fact, in life.
I love a challenge. Challenges are great. This is so I mentioned earlier how me and my co-founder have completely different ways of working. I mean, it's a challenge every single day. Like, we battle over things, and we have different ideas for how things should be done. But in the end, because we have to challenge each other, because we have such opposing opinions, we always settle somewhere in between. Sometimes, one way of doing it, sometimes it's the other, but it's a discussion. Neither one of us would ever just go ahead and bulldoze our way through with our opinion. I think it's really valuable. I always bring that up as something that's really valuable with us. So that's 100%. Good.
Do you find then, once you do eventually come to a decision on certain things, that regardless of who's won that particular thing, it's not really about scoring points, but also it's just about, okay, well, now we've agreed it, we both 100% support this thing, and we will get it across the line? Like, do you find that that's the case too? Yeah. Because I think that's very key too. It's great to have that ability to communicate in that style, but if there is some sort of grievance being held one way or the other, and it's like, okay, well, I'll kind of half-ass this, because if I didn't really agree with it, then you've got a problem, right? Like,
Yeah, I don't think that's the way that I would work. I just don't think I'd be very happy working in that sort of way. And I know that I am probably the one to give in earlier, I would say.
Right.
But not if I have like a strongly held sort of conviction of like, this is the right way to do something. But in general, I'm the one to give in earlier. Although I think he disagrees. We're also married, by the way. That should have been made.
Oh, right. Okay.
But it works great. The only thing is that we work literally all the time. And the one thing I've really found noticeable recently is, like, you can't go on holiday, because if one of you goes on holiday, you want to go on holiday with the other one. So there isn't that sort of support of like, you go away, I'll hold the fort for a week. There is no one else to hold the fort for a week.
And he's co-founder and what sort of main function? Although I know at this stage it's probably,
we called him creative director.
Right. Okay.
Mainly because he's still a photographer and director, as well as doing in-house. So he works like every single hour of the day. During our second fundraise, we had quite a lot of people saying, you can't have a part-time, whatever he was. So he was actually CEO at the time. And then we were like, okay, well, he's actually kind of the tech guy, but he's not building the tech. He understands how it's done. And they were like, well, you can't have a part-time CTO. And it was like, well, he's doing that role anyway, and I'm doing pretty much the role of the CEO. So that's why we decided to switch me to CEO. Spoke to our board, and they all agreed. And then we were like, well, what would we make him? That somebody's not going to go, you can't have a part-time. And actually, I follow a girl called Laura Jackson, and she runs a startup, which is a marketplace for homewares, and she does it with her think it's her brother-in-law, who's an ex-buyer for somebody, and they're really successful. They've raised money, but she is also she's on TV. She's a TV presenter. She's kind of a bit of like an it girl, not through sort of breeding. I think through sort of like, she's a bit of a celebrity because she's on TV, but she also has this startup. And I was just like, well, what do they all say to her? She's obviously doing it full time, and she's a creative director. So seems Till is the one who has all the brilliant ideas for building and creating and what we're going to do next. And it was his idea. I sort of suggested creative director to him, and he was happy with that.
But yeah, I mean, that's odd advice to be given. I think
it wasn't even advice. It was literally people saying they won't invest in you because you can't.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How bizarre. Bizarre.
So,
there you go.
Which was weird because it was like, well, what would change if we came back to you next week and he wasn't the CEO and I was?
I mean, I suppose the only way to get around that is to say, well, in that case, we'll have more money and then we'll pay ourselves a salary so we can justify it, or or maybe there's an ulterior motive there, which is a lot of investors are a bit funny about co-founders who are also in a relationship, and they maybe didn't want to come out and say that.
Some people, so we've asked our investors who have invested in us whether they think it's a problem, and they said something that was really lovely, and it was like, well, you're a proven team,
right?
So why wouldn't we believe that you could be a team on this?
Yeah. If we're not going to back married couples, for Christ's sake, as good team, good teams, then who are we backing?
I think a brother and a sister would probably be better. That's
you reckon?
Stronger. Yeah, I think that's an even stronger co-founding team.
Okay. I don't have any sisters. I have one older brother, so I don't. But so you have a brother, I take it.
I've got a brother, yeah. Do you think you could work with your sister? Sorry,
no, my brother. No, probably not. I think that's right. No, I think I could, but it would depend on what it was we were doing. I don't know. Yeah, probably. It depends. That's a good question. I've never thought about that. I've helped him out because he runs his own business, and he's run many businesses throughout his, mostly service-led businesses, building companies and things like that. And so every now and then he's asked me for sort of strategic and commercial advice. So maybe in that capacity, but as a consultant, I don't know, but you know what I mean, in that sort of dynamic, sort of me doing the strategic stuff and him operational. I don't know. Maybe that's a good question. I've never really thought about it, to be honest. I think we've dabbled in the idea, but we live very far away from each other, so it's not really practical. But that's interesting you said that, siblings being a good a choice.
Yeah. There's another co-founding team that I've met recently, and they're siblings, and I just think, obviously you don't know all the ins and outs, do you? But I think I see them from my point of view as being like, this is a great team. Like I would trust this team to get through difficult things and get through things, basically.
Yeah.
There's kind of
resilience that's built in kind of thing.
Yeah. Kind of that proven team thing, because I also, before I started this founder journey, whatever you want to call it, building a startup, I didn't realize how many startups collapsed because founders fell out.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever fallen out with somebody so much that I would not talk to them in my whole life. So I just can't imagine.
You haven't met the people I've met then.
Well, also, I don't think you're ever in a situation where there's so much pressure on you as when you're trying to pull off things that people are pulling off when they're founding a bloody startup. Yeah.
It's interesting, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it is one of the main contributors to it. Also, inaction is another major part of it. Just this idea of constantly wanting to think about something as opposed to doing it, which I think has a knock-on effect to relationships too. But I honestly think the biggest contributor to founders generally falling out is ego. Someone gets an overinflated ego along the way, and they start making decisions and doing things for their own self-interest as opposed to the interests of the business. And that happens all too often, unfortunately. They're trying to prove their own worth as to why, and it can often come from, not to get too psychoanalytical, but often come from the sense of not feeling like they're good enough for the role, and they overcompensate sometimes with that the anxiety that comes with that, and by trying to justify their own place in the business, and that's often where it comes from. That's what I've observed, at least.
Literally, I can't imagine doing anything worse than like just
right.
putting my own ego before anybody else. Like, I know that makes me sound like a saint, doesn't it? But that makes me cringe to like the bottom of my toes, and like, I'd definitely be the one who isn't doing that and just sort of going like, oh, you go forth. But then that's also bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I'm with you. I mean, I'm more interested in building cool stuff, in solving problems with the solutions that we provide. Like, that's what I'm more interested in, and you know, by nature of what I do, and you sound quite similar to me in that sense, is I'm interested in seeing other people succeed. Like that gives me genuine like, you know, comfort.
It's so heartwarming, actually.
Right. It's like I'm okay. Like, you know, I'm okay where I am. I've got what I need to, you know, have. If I lose anything, I can go and get more. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, I know I'm resourceful. I know how to do shit. So I'm like, I don't need to fend for myself as much. But like, you know, you're really good. Like, let the world see you. You know, that's kind of how I, and you sound quite similar in that sense.
Yeah, there's that phrase, isn't it? Something like make friends with people who will say your name in a room full of other people, or something like that.
Right.
And it's just that's another part of the beauty of like getting a network of founders that you get on with, where you know that founders are constantly looking for something, because it's either business, money, and when you make these connections in your network and you start hearing that other people have talked about you, or like put somebody in touch with you, or that, that's the sort of heartwarming part of, I think,
you remember those people
being part of this like really intense club.
yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think that's one of the lessons I learned very early on in this world of startups and founders and all that, is that if you genuinely look to try and help as many people as possible, that is really what networking is. It's not this wanky, like you're going back to my statement earlier about this wanky idea of walking up to people and going, oh, hi, my name is Greg McCullum. I do this. Would you like to buy my shit? Or, you know, it's not that. It's not about trying to gloat about what what you've achieved or anything like that, which I think everyone's main perception as to what networking is before being involved. It is genuinely going in and being like, how can I help? Like, what do you need? What have I got that I can give you, as opposed to what have you got that I can take? And definitely the doors really do open up. And if they don't, it's not the end of the world. Because again, if you go in that with that perception of like, if I do this, I'll get something back, it's like, well, then that's not actually true altruism, is it? Like, you don't gift something at Christmas with the expectation of getting something back, or at least you shouldn't, right? You know, so it's that whole concept. I think the more honestly you do that, without really giving a crap if it results in anything, the happier you will be. Yeah. And that's all that matters.
Yeah, definitely. Although you do need to learn how to be in a room full of people who aren't talking to you and walk up and say, hello, I'm Isabella. I run InHaus. What do you do? That was definitely a skill that I had to learn after going to a few events and just standing in the corner and being like, God, nobody's talking to me. And then being like, I need to talk to them. Okay, I'm starting to understand this sort of process now. And I walk into any room and just walk up to the first person and just be like, hi, I'm Isabella, who are you?
Yeah. But this is the thing, though. I think that a lot of the common mistake I think a lot of people make when learning that is that they approach it from the perspective of like sales, right? In the sense of like, I need to learn how to pitch myself and how to, you know what I mean? Like that. It's like, and I don't know, actually what you need to do is tap into curiosity. That's what you need to tap in. So the goal of you going over isn't to introduce yourself and make a good impression. The goal of you going over is to find out as much as you can about that person, and to genuinely like just see if they might be cool and you know, learn about what they've been up to and, you know, stuff like that. Which is why I like doing this, because I'm I think quite a creative person by nature. So which I think we all are in this space. I think, you know, as an entrepreneur or founder, you have to be inherently quite curious.
I think curiosity, it's like you have to have the curiosity. You
Mm.
have to have that, so that, like, I mean, the number of people that I've heard that have pivoted, and like I remember when I first
Right.
heard of something pivoting a business, just being like, what? You've given up
Mm.
on your original idea? Like, this is mad. This is completely insane. Like, why would you do that? Like, I just did not understand the concept of pivoting. And I think the more I've sort of watched people do it from afar, I'm just sort of like, oh, it's because their curiosity led them in this direction, but then it went in that direction. And they realized that this is a better direction to go in.
Mm.
And it's still totally to do with their own original business, but rather than just sticking with something and just being like adamant that it's going to work and
Right, being stubborn.
Stubbornness is like, I don't think you can be a founder and stubborn. I think you need to be very flexible and curious.
Yeah, and also no one, I don't think, talks about the flexibility that's needed once you've made the business successful too. I mean, like, look at all of the big brands that surround us. They don't survive by staying the same. They constantly need to evolve and change. And the businesses that you see that fail are the ones that refuse to change. I mean, look at Blockbuster. Like, as an example, like there are plenty of businesses out there so varying degrees of pivoting. But the point is, you do need to continuously reinvent yourself and stay relevant, because tastes change, and more than anyone, fashion. Things become fashionable and come in and out of season. So it's very important to stay as close to that as possible without alienating as well.
So yeah, going back to like what we first started talking about when you asked about AI and in InHaus.ai, which is obviously our full name, we really thought that AI was the way to go. And I know that lots of people in fashion are still playing around with the AI, and there's lots of sort of AI like generated fashion things happening, especially at campaign level. But
a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the show and only takes a couple of minutes.
I think we started to move away from that, because we started to see that, like, no, people wanted realness more and more. Like, that was actually the most important thing. Like, the reason that returns happen so often is because people are receiving something that they didn't expect.
Right.
So why would you create something that isn't what they're going to expect, that isn't what they expect, and then send something different? Like, no, just try and represent exactly what it is that they are buying, and then send it back, and then they shouldn't return it. That's kind of the idea.
That's an interesting point. I've had this conversation a few times recently about this idea that the rise in the popularity of AI, mostly among companies, I don't think the general public cares as much about it as the media would like us to believe. But we'll probably create this counterbalance where I think the general public is going to be more interested in authenticity than anything else. And it's kind of, to go back to my vinyl example earlier, it's like this idea that the more you push something inauthentic on people, the more they want to go and seek out the sort of more vintage form of that thing, to feel like there's a bit more of a connection to that, the origin of that thing. And I think that we'll see that definitely within the creative space more and more. Excuse me. Where, especially with the rise of things like AI generated art and so on, I think we're probably going to see this increase in popularity and in seeing people actually paint artworks and visit art galleries and stuff like that. In the same way that
is the value of the not the original, but like the painted work going to increase compared to the fact that, like, yes, you can get this amazing AI like images and videos, whatever, but which one has not more value, but like which one is going to increase in value because of sort of the rarity, I can't think of the right word, but like you're saying, like the authenticity of like a vinyl. I think it's very interesting for years.
Definitely. I think we're already seeing that to an extent. That's not to say that I think that people won't care so much about the hidden elements of AI, in terms of the way it helps people in their day-to-day lives, hidden in technologies and things. I don't think they'll care much about that. If it helps them, great. If it's going to, unfortunately, the general public isn't going to give a shit whether or not the factory workers lose their job because they're going to be replaced by AI robots, or, lorries are going to be driven by AI. Like, they don't care about that. Like, they're not going to say, well, I want my products to be authentically couriered from one part of the country to another. Like, that isn't the kind of thing. But when it comes to interacting with things or people, I think that's where people want that authenticity, and that's going to I think that's going to sort of increase in the public consciousness, perhaps.
I mean, it kind of already is shown by the huge increase in UGC content, user-generated content that you find online. I mean, like, that's so hugely successful in terms of marketing, and it's like, I find it so interesting that most of it happens on social media, and social media is so fake. Like, people are portraying fake lives and how happy they are, and you hear about like the couple that's just got divorced, and actually on Valentine's Day they posted this like beautiful picture of them at this beautiful dinner, and you sit there and you're like, oh god, I don't do that. Like, I wish I'd done something like that, been romantic, instead like we all just fell asleep. But and then on the flip side, you have on social media user-generated content, which is selling more because it feels authentic. Everything's being flipped on its head.
Excuse me. But like you said, there is an irony to that, because there is an inauthenticity to the authentic content, because it is still, it's very meticulously created and calculated. Like, there's nothing authentic about it. Like, I mean,
it's their job to create this content. Like we were talking about the podcasts earlier. It's like, their job isn't to distribute advice. Their job is to create content so that they make money.
Yeah. But I suppose that what it is true about that is the simplicity of it, to a degree, in that it is just a person or a group of people just talking to the camera, as opposed to flashy graphics and this, that, and the other. So there might be behind camera, it might be in a studio, and it might be a fake living room, and it might be whatever, and cameras and producers and editors, but what they're resonating with is fairly honest in that sense, compared to the alternative, which is something maybe the overly produced or so on, I guess.
Well, the campaign shots with a model, it's like, I don't relate to that. I'm never going to look like that. So like the user-generated one, you can relate to, because it's a person that looks like you, sat in their living room with an iPhone.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, it comes down to taste changing, in terms of consumer behavior, because of it all swings, and it also, I suppose, depends on the goals of the corporation. Like, you're in the fashion world, and so you'll know this probably way better than I do. But the Gucci's of the world, the Pradas of the world, don't have the same target audience as the M&S's of the world and the Primarks of the world. So the way that they're going to create content is very specifically designed to cater for that audience. They're not going to, Prada isn't going to encourage user-generated content in order to promote their product. You know what I mean? Like, they want it to be carefully curated and appeal to a very specific set of individuals who are aspiring to a very specific lifestyle, right? So there's a lot of variables in it, isn't it? It's not as simple, I suppose, as maybe we're trying to make it out to be.
You're definitely right there. We didn't think of that, did we, at the beginning of this conversation? We started comparing UGC.
Nothing ever is simple.
And
nothing is ever that simple. But it's interesting. You touched on this idea of the fact that there's a lot happening in this space. What are your thoughts on some of these things happening in this space? In the fashion space, especially around like AR. I've seen some really amazing stuff happen with mixed reality with that. Do you think that's going to play a part, more so in the space of fashion?
There's certain things which I think really fit with AR and AI. So shoes, for example, a pair of trainers, like I don't really need to see how a pair of shoes moves on a foot to buy it. So I think a scanned trainer is totally fine for me to see that on screen and decide whether I want to buy that shoe or not. And then I've also recently been, I can't remember what website it was, but you could use your phone and place that trainer in the room with you. I mean, they've been doing it with like homewares for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
For fashion, it was like one of the first ones that I've seen, or a bag. And I was like, that really works because they are showing you the size and the shape, which you can't really get from just looking at it on a screen as like a scan. You can if they place it in the room because they've worked out all the dimensions of it. So I was like, that's cool. I think that's really great. There's other stuff that's happening, which is like AI models. And I know there was a lot of backlash not long ago. I think it was Levi's were using a company and they wanted to promote a more diverse model cast. And I mean, the first thing I thought when I saw, I was just sort of like, just hire diverse models.
Right.
and I think that's what they got backlash for mainly. It's just sort of like you don't have to create diverse models. There are diverse models; they exist.
Yeah.
They are everywhere. You can hire them. And then there's
unless you want different species, right? Like that would be interesting. I'd be interested to see a brand that's like, do you know what, we want to do it with some alien.
So Skims did that. They had this beach scene, and they had like aliens in the clothes, which I thought was really cool. I was like, because that was kind of like, it was a concept. It was, the clothes looked real because it wasn't AI generated clothes. It was just the model that was AI generated, and obviously you can't book an alien, so go for it. Create an AI alien. Yes. But then you've got the models who just look like models, and I'm like, that's where I'm like, just book a model. I don't really know how the costs sort of end up evening out, because it's expensive to create good AI generated content.
But there's a lot that happens in the fashion industry when it comes to models, body image, gender, race, that seems to be done very intentionally to stir up controversy, because it attracts an enormous amount of attention to that product line.
Yes, there was also a recent thing I saw on Instagram where a model was complaining because she walked somebody's catwalk show, and then the designer replaced her face with a different face that looked very realistic but was just white on social media. And she was like, I walked that for very little money for the exposure, but now even that's been taken away from me. And that was a really interesting sort of like, because you pay to use the license the model's face essentially when you book a model. And so if you swap the face afterwards, it's like, well, it doesn't matter, it's not your face anymore, is it? So you can do whatever you want with that piece of content. So I think there'll be some really interesting things happening around that, and the legislation that's going to come about from that. In the same way that I think using other people's artwork in AI, because there's been lots of talk about this now, hasn't there, where artists are being ripped off because AI is just pulling their stuff from online and just creating other things with it. I think that was really interesting. But then I saw a talk recently which was really sort of powerful and interesting, where he was talking about being I think he was an art director based up in Manchester, and he wanted to create a mood board where he was like, I'm going to pick two of the wildest opposing brands, and he picked Wedgwood and Thrasher, and he was like skateboards and like pottery. And he created this mood board basically out of that, and it was like it would be impossible to do this with any sort of like, not even accuracy, but sort of like effect without using AI.
Right.
And so he does a lot of that at the moment. I thought that was really interesting, because that was creating mood boards to then create something real out of it.
Right. Yeah.
So it was the inspiration. Using AI as the inspiration. It wasn't the final product. But to get there, you have to mash these two things together, which I think would be very difficult.
It would take a lot of time and creativity. So I think that's a great use case for AI, is this idea of inspiration, fast tracking the brainstorming process for that. But yeah, you raise a couple of really interesting things there, because like you were saying about sort of virtual assets of fashion products is something that I find really interesting, because of I don't think it's wrong to assume that the virtual world is going to increase in terms of its currency over time, right? People are going to be spending more and more time there. And I do think that people would be very happy with the idea that they could purchase something in the real world, that they also get a digital twin of it to be able to wear in a virtual world. And that, you know, then it does bring on, you know, even to what you were saying about like a virtual model and all that, like, you know, I think people are going to have digital twins of themselves, just like we right now have a digital twin in a more analog sense that lives on Instagram and in TikTok that isn't us. We have a curated version. I think we will have a replicated version of ourselves. And yeah, of course, if you're gonna spend, I don't know, $1,000 on a pair of nice shoes, you'd probably, I think, expect at some point that you can wear them in both planes, you know, probably.
I think it's definitely going even a step further than that. People are buying just the digital version. So there's a company called the Institute of Digital Fashion, and they are pushing a lot of that at the moment. Where, for example, red carpet looks, you can't see it on the red carpet, but afterwards they have like these amazing like digital dresses, and I mean they're not just a dress, it's like, you know, structures attached to the people. And I think you'll see a lot more of that, where people are living, because they do it now. They buy clothes and then they return them straight away, and all they do is take a photograph at home in this new item or with this new item, and then it gets returned. So it's not like you actually own the item. All you want to do is show yourself with it on social media. So why not buy a digital version of this thing? It's exactly the same.
That would be a great business idea there. You know, just like, you know, where, you know, basically it's been done, is it? Okay, well that's brilliant. Like, so what do they just wear, like a green screen dress, and then like they can pick and choose?
It's like a filter, so like an Instagram filters can tell where your face is. So it's just object tracking.
That's genius. Yeah. But I suppose with AI, what you could do is just upload images of your face and just say, make me wear this dress, like, and actually you could have an unlimited, you know, versions of in multiple poses and environments and stuff like that. So that's the more prevalent thing probably going to be coming about now, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely.
Have me sat in a Ferrari outside of a mansion wearing a Rolex and you know, whatever else. That's going to be the new thing.
So now I know what you would pick.
Oh no, like I don't like any of those things, but like those are just the most lavish things I could think of, which is probably shows my ignorance to those sort of things, because there's probably way better brands that I named, but I don't know. Yeah, no, it's super interesting. But so where do you see yourselves? You know, what's kind of next for? Obviously, you're working on this deal at the moment. But what does the rest of 2024 hold for the business?
So interestingly, I know we've been talking about all this AI and like where things are going, but we're taking almost a step back, and we're going to start producing photos for our app as well as videos.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so we realized quite a while ago that why would you use a camera and an iPhone on set when you could just use the iPhone and produce all your content through the iPhone? So that's what's coming next for probably Q4 this year, which is pretty exciting to start talking about that now. And then on from there, there's, like I said, there's so much stuff that we were so excited to think about doing when we first started this company. Things like overlays and like an alien head overlay. What if, you know, there's a company that was like, cool, we've done all our e-commerce, but this season we want Father Christmas's head to be on every item of clothing.
Right.
And the thought process behind that, and like whether people actually want it, whether you could do there's a lot that you can do. Obviously, using a mobile phone, it's got object tracking, which we can build into our app. So all of this that's way further on the horizon.
Well, and also digital twinning. I mean, the opportunity is there as well, isn't it, to some extent?
You mean like take a scan of the clothing?
Yeah, because of some of the software I'm seeing out there now doesn't need an enormous amount of input.
No, it doesn't.
To generate a lot of it, which is kind of crazy.
The thing is, for that, to scan an object, you need the object in front of you anyway.
Right.
So for e-commerce companies that are trying to produce so much of this content day in, day out, and I'm talking like, you know, hundreds of assets a day, if they've got the object in front of them, to take a photograph or to take a video is so much quicker than to scan the object and then decide what to do with it afterwards.
Right.
There are other companies that are doing scanning. There's one called CoVision Labs that are doing lots of stuff with Adidas, I think, at the moment.
Right.
And Zara.
That's quite a specialized thing then.
Yeah, they have like a machine to do it. It's just not something that we are looking into at the moment. It's something that we get asked about by investors all the time, every time we're out there fundraising. And people are like, oh, what about scanning? What about this? And we keep saying sort of like, we're not pivoting to going to more sort of photo and video, but it's more just sort of like the more we work in this area, the more we realize the most important thing right now is photo and video. So that's what we're concentrating on. we've only just managed to take off the video, so
well, yeah, because there's always
selling it a little bit.
No, absolutely, but I see what your point on that, because if I suppose even if the trend was to go towards buying digital versions of these products and all the other stuff we talked about, people will still want to see the product on a model. They're still going to want to see it in situ, as a tool to be able to help them understand if it's a product, how it sits and how it wears. I suppose the only thing that could supersede that is the AR stuff, of seeing it on themselves, but even then, like, that might not be enough to get them through the door initially, right?
I also feel like nothing is going to overtake and cancel out something else. Like, I don't think video is going to get rid of photos, and I don't think AI is going to get rid of videos or photos.
These things will live together.
It's in addition, like, the more information you can give your customer, the more sure they're going to be about their purchase, and the less surprised they are going to be about anything that arrives. So reducing that return rate.
But also, we have to bear in mind, I suppose, that there's a component of this that maybe I'm forgetting. I'm not saying, I was going to say we're forgetting, but I doubt you have. It's maybe more me, which is the model. The model plays a very crucial role in this. So, like, regardless of whether you see the item on its own or see it on yourself, actually seeing an item on a model is part of the aspirational piece of it, isn't it? Like, that there's a reason why models are traditionally beautiful or have this very specific look. It is to create that sense of desire in the product. So that serves a very important role in the process of eliciting a purchase response, right? So if you remove that and you just say it's only the product or seeing it on yourself in AR, then that might not elicit the same response, unless they're a supermodel themselves. I don't know. But, like, if it was me, I'd be like, hell yeah, I look good. That's a different story. But not everyone is as fortunate as me. That's what I'm saying. So,
you've got it right. The reason that models are beautiful and they are cast is because it's aspirational. There's lots more diversity in modeling casting now, especially with some of the sports brands. They're really trying to sort of show real bodies, real people wearing the items, but quite often you find, again, it's in addition to models wearing the items, or they'll have many different types of people wearing the item, and that's, I think, pretty powerful as well right now, where you have the same item of clothing being worn by multiple people in the size that fits them, so that people, again, it's just an accurate representation of the clothing. So if you're a size 8, you're buying a size 22, you don't know what the 22 looks like just because it's on a size 8 model. But if the photos there of both of them, then you've got an accurate representation of what it looks like.
I saw some, or read or heard some data on recently that's been a bit of a failure in terms of the sort of experiment within the fashion industry to try and use plus size models and so on, in terms of the numbers, that it's actually had quite a negative effect on the sales numbers. Is that not the case?
I think when you start introducing any sort of diversity, the numbers don't shoot up straight away. I think
because I'm talking more specifically to do with, like, the size, the diversity in size.
So I think when they started introducing diversity of any sorts, whenever it started, there's always a drop before it picks up. And I think it also varies according to what brand you are. There's certain brands which really, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but maybe you're buying things not because you want to look beautiful, but because you want to go on a hike and you want it to be robust and do like a certain thing, like it has a purpose rather than making you look beautiful. And I think in those instances and situations it really does work, but there's still that expectation that we all have to see a beautiful model wearing something. So I think we just need to get used to it in the same way that getting used to seeing AI stuff has to happen before I think people really latch onto it and say, like, I would buy something based just on an AI drawing of a dress, and then when it arrives, to be perfectly happy with what arrives. I just think there's a lot of just getting used to stuff, and the fashion industry is a very strange place to work. It's beautiful and it's creative, but it's also fucking awful.
Yeah. You know, I at one point wanted to go into the industry. So I'll bore you with a story. When I came out of school, I left school early because I was a nightmare. And then I did go to college, and I wanted to study art. So I actually went and studied art at college in Oxford, where I'm from. And there was a module, you know, there was all the modules, you know, fine arts and modern, blah 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 blah. And there was a module that in my first year which encouraged us to explore the fashion side of things, and I got really into it, and very, very much into you know, the creative process of not only of design, more so the designing, the illustrative sort of side of it, rather than the actual making of it. But and at one point I thought, you know, that was going to be my calling, which was odd because before that I was, you know, a surrealist, and you know, and I was drawing some pretty out there and creating some pretty out there sculptures and stuff like that. So I was able to find a very unusual application of that for a brief period, but then the course turned out to be shit, and but and I got very disillusioned with the art world when I met a couple of famous artists and realized that they were full of shit. But yeah, that was my. Sorry, what was that?
I think that quite often happens when you meet important people from whatever industry it may be, and then disillusionment follows.
Yeah, I won't name any names, but yeah, it was pretty.
Tell me the secret after.
Yeah, but it was pretty disappointing. British as well, very famous British modern artists, and yeah, their attitude and their artwork was just like, what am I doing? Like, this is all nonsense, you know. What
I don't want to be associating with people.
No. So it was very similar to cooking for me, because then I decided I wanted to be a chef, and same sort of thing. I realized it was killing my passion for something, because it was you know, so art, which I've got some paintings behind me, which I haven't touched in like 4 years, but yeah, art and cooking, I thought, you know what, leave them as hobbies. It's not true that if you turn a hobby into work, that you'll never work a day in your life. It's bollocks.
Oh, absolutely not. Like, I really hate that phrase. And I also hate that thing of sort of turning your hobby into a side hustle. No, don't. Just leave it as a hobby. Just enjoy what you're doing. Don't try and sell it.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, I don't know, it depends on what it is though. And if you're making Rolexes on the side, then, you know.
You're obsessed with Rolexes.
I know. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't even. I don't even like normal watches. I like these things. So I don't know what that's all about. But yeah, look, I know that you have a hard stop in like 2 minutes, don't you?
I can see people. So I've got like a little thin strip of glass that I can see people walking past.
From your cell.
From the cell, exactly. Yeah, I can see people leaving, all the models and all the other people. So yeah, I'm going to have to go. But this
we'll wrap it up. Yeah, it's been great having you. Thank you so much. And look, where can people go? I'll put your links and stuff below. But is there anywhere you want to push people towards aside from the website and maybe your link?
I think our website is the best place. We do have an Instagram, but there's not much that happens on there.
Okay.
Yeah, but the website is the best place for people to find out information about us.
Brilliant. All right. Well, all that will be
which goes to my LinkedIn. I don't send people to my LinkedIn. That's too businessy.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll put the links down below in a way, and if people want to connect with you, maybe to give you some of their money or support or whatever, then
that would be lovely. Send them messages my way. Well, I welcome them.
Cool. Well, look, good luck with everything. It's really exciting, and we'll stay in touch and hopefully maybe do a part 2 in future.
Thanks.
Where you can put up with me talking some more rubbish.
When I've actually signed some contracts, I'll come back. And tell you about
yes. Let me know. Keep me posted. Yeah, for sure. Because if consider me one of your official cheerleaders. So
thanks.
Yeah. Good luck with it all. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Cheers.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe and join in the conversation in the comments below.